Hello and welcome to our accounts presentation for the year ending the 31st of December 2019 in advance of our AGM on the 14th of July. What the headlines are is that this year has been a year of change, which saw the opening of the Wellington orbit on the 11th of May, and we showed our first film on the 29th of June. Our assets have cost us £584,000, and as you'll see, our capital reserves have increased substantially during the year. The next three slides will show the comparatives of the last 5 years to show how we've developed as a society. Firstly, we got the figures for income, and you'll see that there's been a massive increase of income during the year. Secondly, in terms of assets, we've actually increased our assets substantially. The figures down here, by the way, are the figures for the net book value in the accounts. And finally, in terms of our profit or excess of income over expenditure, which is the correct term, we've now got 31,000 in profit. Before we go on to the accounts themselves, it would be useful to outline what the society is all about. We're a community benefit society with around 800 members and are recognised by HMRC as a charity. We need to have rules under our governing act, which is the Cooperative and Community Benefit Societies Act 2014, and they show our aims to be the provision of arts and cultural facilities for the benefit of the community, which is very important because what this means is the community will tell us what they want rather than for society to tell the community what benefits them. On the accounts, we'll start by setting out what our accounting policies are. These are what is known as the Charities Statement of Recognised Practice, SORP for short, and means that we incorporate within our income and expenditure account income from all sources and not just trading income. We are effectively a charity that has a business, and that business needs to be run on commercial lines to ensure that the charitable purposes are met. It's also important to make it clear that any surpluses arising through the activities of the society throughout the year are ploughed back for the continuation and development of the society and not to go to members by way of dividends. To reiterate, 2019 was a year of change when we actually finished the redevelopment work in May and opened on the 11th of May and showed our first film on the 29th of June. There's been a gradual increase of 7-day opening during the year, and there's been an increase of supplementary sources of income. Turning to the construction period, it started in November 2018 and finished in May 2019. And we need to pay a huge debt of gratitude to every single main contractor we had, being Arts Alliance for the cinema projection equipment, Furco for the seats, Eric Neville for the catering equipment, and in particular McPhillips, who oversaw the whole project. Beneath that, we also need to praise the efforts of two individuals, being Sarah Chard, who was our project manager throughout the construction period and before, and Steve Cooper, the site agent of McPhillips, who totally embraced the project and was an inspiration behind getting the building to the state it currently is. We'd also like to thank a volunteer, Ava, who helped construct our fixed asset register, which was a monumental task as we have over 500 separate items of expenditure. The fixed assets on the balance sheet are split between tangible and intangible fixed assets. The intangible fixed assets are the proportion of Sarah's fees and those of our Chief Officer, Sophie Eads, up to the time in which we opened, which is involved in getting systems and processes in place and will be broadly written off over the length of the lease and are characterised in the accounts as development expenditure. As for the fixed assets on the balance sheet, they fall into 5 broad categories, and we'll cover the accounting treatment of 4 of them in the slides below. Leasehold additions represent the basic gutting out of the ground floor with quite a lot of demolition work and the removal of stud walls. This was because we were replacing the old banking hall and the back office with the cinema and community space. Most of this will be long-term alterations, which require no alteration, and we are depreciating them over 25 years, which is justifiable with the lease extension. Fixtures and fittings represent the significant expenditure we incurred on such items as the new staircase, new partitions, upgraded toilets, new electrical work, and the ventilation for the cinema. Under land law, these belong to the landlord but are classified as tenants' fixtures and can theoretically be removed at the end of the lease. We feel it important that we retain these on the balance sheet and we will depreciate them over the life of the new lease. The bulk of the cafe equipment covers the fully fitted kitchen supplied by Eric Neville, and we mainly depreciate over 10 years. However, we do have numerous items of small equipment in the way of kitchen tools, cutlery, etc., which we put to the balance sheet at cost, and they will not be depreciated. Rather, their replacements will be written off in full to the income expenditure account in the year in which the expenditure is incurred. Finally, for the cinema equipment, we've been advised by both suppliers that they have a useful economic life of 10 years, and we've depreciated them on a straight line basis over that period. We'll now turn to the income and expenditure account, and you'll see below the various sources of income we have. Firstly, though, it's important to state that the excess for the year has been achieved through higher than anticipated donations, and we can't expect that going forward. The fact is that while we've been building up the audience base, the business side has been run at a loss. However, we do have business plans which we've reduced up to 2030, so we know what our targets are and what we need to achieve to be profitable going forward. In relation to donations and grants, the major items are a donation from All Saints Church and a grant from Social Investment Business. The money from All Saints was used in the community space area, where we now hold a young parents and toddlers group every Tuesday. The money from Social Investment Business came under what is known as their Reach Fund and is designed to help charities raise investment. As for the cinema, we showed our first film on the 29th of June, and since then it's been a vertical learning curve. We've been assisted in two ways. Firstly, by the engagement of a cinema consultant by the name of Becca Fozzard out of the Reach Fund grant, and secondly, through membership of the British Film Institute Film Audience Network, through which we've obtained a grant known as a Show Fund grant, which has enabled us to show non-mainstream films. As part of the grant, attendees were encouraged to fill in survey forms, and the results were very encouraging. Virtually everyone had a high opinion of the venue and of the film shown, and 38% of people were new attendees, indicating that there is an appetite to show non-mainstream films within the borough. In fact, 98% said they'd attend again. The other thing we actually ascertained was the age profile of our audience was mainly 50 plus, and that affects our choice of films going forward. This slide shows how our audience figures have developed over the period of opening, with a particularly poor October when there wasn't a great deal of decent films shown. Otherwise, the audiences have built up significantly, taking into account also that in December the period is shorter because of Christmas closing. This is a list of our top 5 attended films, showing a certain genre with Downton Abbey, Yesterday, Little Women, 1917 and Judy. If you need to know a bit more about the economics of the film industry, there's quite a detailed explanation within the director's report within the accounts. Turning to the area you come into once you enter the building through the main entrance, we prefer to consider that to be community space rather than just being a cafe, as the space fulfills more than one function, beyond the cafe being a kiosk area for the cinema, a display area for artwork pending the development of the upper floors, a venue for quizzes, meeting space, and also the venue for the parent and toddler group. Food sales themselves consist of 3 main areas, being light meals, what we call a coffee crowd, who come in for a coffee and a chat throughout the day, and the area for taking concessions into the cinema or consuming them before attending films. Food sales themselves were affected by 2 factors, first of all being the soft opening and the fact we showed no films until the 29th of June, and secondly through experiencing recruitment issues which were addressed in late October. Going forward, we have plans to increase the takeaway service and have meal nights together with buffet and meal arrangements we already have for private bookings of films. The table of total sales shows an upward trend which was halted through the unavailability of food in most of September and October, and also there is a small dip in December because of the fact that the facility was open for a shorter period of time with the Christmas holidays. Overall, however, there is an encouraging upward trend. Other sales will increase once the development of floors takes place, but in the meantime they include art sold in the community space, display of jewellery, some merchandising and quizzes and talks. In addition, we had sundry income during the year, including recharges from HSBC for meeting their obligations under their head lease with the landlord, and secondly, sponsorship income, including particular sponsorship of cinema seats for 5 years at £100 a seat, which was taken up in full, and also the Orbit beer brewed by the Pheasant pub, for which we got 5p per pint sold. As regards expenditure, all our fixed and variable expenditures are subject to budgetary targets with business plans in place until 2030 and subject to regular review based on our experiences. We have also set gross profit rate targets for both the cinema and food sales, and overall our aim is to generate sufficient surpluses to be debt-free by 2026 and to repay all our loan obligations. Turning first of all to staffing, we very much followed the successful model of Festival Drayton up at Market Drayton of being a community organisation with a core of full-time employees supplemented by volunteers. We've built up our employee base during the year, so we have now 2 full-time and 2 part-time employees in Sophie, Damien, John and Hannah. And we'd like to place on record our appreciation and acknowledgement of their tremendous enthusiasm and dedication that has moved the project forward to its current state from starting from scratch. Overall, our manpower requirements are computed by reference to the staffing and man hours at our cinema consultant cinema and adapted to our different opening hours, business functions and level of outsourcing. Our manpower requirement is computed at 332 hours per week, which includes staff time, pure volunteer time, and operational tasks undertaken by directors on a voluntary basis, which is not insignificant. The economic value of volunteering is estimated at £105,000 per annum, on top of which there is a social value which we'll cover shortly. A varied level of opportunities exist on a voluntary basis, covering a broad range of skills, including ushering, food preparation, serving, and administration. In fact, volunteering is a key component of the Society's ethos, being a charitable objective in promoting citizenship and community development, and we've had many instances when people have moved on to better things following volunteering with us. I'll leave this caption on for 10 seconds or so you can read it, as it just gives a flavour of what volunteering can do for the individuals working with ourselves. Turning to other items on the balance sheet, the current assets are fairly unremarkable and are fully in line with the business that runs on credit terms. However, the creditors falling due within 1 year are very high in relation to turnover, but we've taken action to address this, and these are shown in the post-balance sheet events below. Other borrowings due over 1 year include the Director's Loan Account and loans under Social Investment Tax Relief. Social investment tax relief is a complex subject and will be worth a presentation on its own. However, we have been used as a case study by the leading social investor, Big Society Capital, and made a presentation at a Good Finance Live event in Birmingham in November. If anyone wants to look at this further, the link is attached and you can understand social investment tax relief in further detail. In addition, we received a number of capital grants during the year, with the big one being the Telford and Wrekin Council 50th Anniversary Legacy Grant of £150,000. And in this respect, we need to offer our huge thanks to Wellington Town Council in nominating us as the recipient. This grant was specifically earmarked against construction, partly for cinema projection equipment, partly for the cinema seating, and partly for overall construction by McPhillips. What we've done is we are amortising this grant, which means putting a credit in the income and expenditure account over the useful economic life of these assets, and that is netted off against depreciation. It is worthwhile saying a bit more about governance. The rules require a board of directors to manage the business, and the directors set out the policy and strategy for the business. The Chief Officer has operational responsibility and reports to the board weekly on performance for that week, with a monthly report presented at the monthly board meetings on wider issues. The directors are chosen for their skill sets and passion for the community. No director draws any remuneration whatsoever, even for operational tasks. Usually, post-balance sheet events are quite dull, but for this year we made two significant steps since the year end, being a reduction in indebtedness and securing the long-term future of the society. The reason for the high level of trade creditors was a consequence of long-term negotiations had with a social investor by the name of Residents. We finally agreed a loan at preferential repayment and interest terms using social investment tax relief in February. In the same month, a substantial donation was received, and the debts due within a year are now in line with our expectations of being less than 2 months of expenditure, and this will be quite persuasive in grant applications, as we will not have a large amount of debt repayable within a year to be met. The second step involves securing our long-term future by renegotiating our lease terms. When we secured the lease in May 2018, the ownership structure was quite complicated, with HSBC leasing the property off a charity. Since then, the charity sold their freehold, and the new landlord negotiated a surrender premium with HSBC to release HSBC from their head lease. We then took the opportunity to renegotiate a new lease with the freeholder, which was secured in February 2020. The new lease has been renegotiated on considerably improved terms from the previous lease, which contained a number of restrictive elements. The old lease was due to expire in 2023, but we now have an extension until 2030. Having said that, the rental levels remain static until 2023, although we now have full repairing and insurance obligations. In addition, the new lease is what is known as being within the Act, which means we possess an automatic right of renewal in 2030. In addition, we can also sublet, which we were prohibited to do under the old lease. The effect of the lease extension is that we can now proceed with confidence with the expansion into the upper floors, whereas before our short period of tenure was a dissuading factor to potential grantors. In fact, our current business plan factored in no income whatsoever in respect of income from upstairs. Funding will be a way of grants, retained profits and additional share capital using SITR as far as possible. With our current level of debt, we are not looking to have additional loan finance, as the cost of servicing the debt would be prohibitive. However, the grant process has currently been postponed on account of the pandemic. We closed our doors on the 19th of March and now face economic challenges, both on closing down and also planning for reopening. We would, however, like to point out that we cannot and will not abandon or put in abeyance our fundamental ethos just because the business premises is shut, when the community needs support more than ever during the current unprecedented circumstances. Operationally, our focus has been on social media, and it's gratifying to note the increase in Facebook engagement of over 100 during lockdown. We've tried to make social media as interactive as possible with quizzes, cartoons, crosswords, films, clips and talks. The closing down process has now been completed, and as many contracts as possible have been put on pause. Our emphasis during closure is on tight budgetary control, and we've been aided with a £25,000 grant from the government under the COVID emergency measures, and also employers have been furloughed. Our aim during the lockdown is to not go into overdraft, and that should be the case comfortably up to the 30th of June, and while the position is more difficult to forecast thereafter, the current indications are that we'll be continuing government support. If anything, the challenges on reopening are potentially harder than closing down. Essentially, we are faced with a public health issue with economic consequences rather than the other way round. Our focus on reopening will be understanding our customers' needs, ensuring that adequate safeguarding is in place for everybody, customers, staff and volunteers alike. We'll be enhancing our marketing effort and we'll be working with distributors to provide the best available film content on reasonable terms. Currently, the position is unclear about when we will be reopening, and we will be guided by government policy, which to date indicates that there will be no reopening before the 4th of July. We can only proceed on the basis of that guidance. Because of the financial support we are getting, we are not making a special appeal for funding at this stage, as we hold reserves up to the 30th of June, and there are many worthy causes targeting the relief of immediate stress. The level of ongoing government support after the 30th of June remains uncertain, although it's becoming clearer by the day, and also it's become clearer by the day how the easing of restrictions will apply to mass gatherings. The one thing that COVID-19 has shown is that we are all incomplete without the community around us, and we will adapt to the new normality, and our intention is to fully come back stronger as a result of the experience of COVID-19. So we see the post-COVID-19 world for Wellington Orbit being a business with a robust balance sheet in place and being ready to embark on phase 2 of the project to make use of the upper floors for such things as art gallery, training room, rehearsal rooms, dance studios, basically anything that the community wants. The one thing we can't overstress is the positivities of a large membership base. Currently, for every member we have to date, we've been able to secure the equivalent of £500 in funding. Therefore, we are now launching a further drive for new members, as phase 2 will be community and grant funded, and strong membership is so persuasive to grantors. So to summarise the position for this 2019 accounts presentation, there are 4 main bullet points. Firstly, 2019 saw the opening of the facilities, and this has been achieved with a surplus of income over expenditure. Secondly, the building blocks are now in place to expand into the rest of the building. Thirdly, the pandemic has highlighted how important the community is and the ongoing opportunity to develop on that. Finally, we are making a call to members to actually facilitate the funding of the next stage of the development through subscribing for additional share capital and also for people to become members of the society. If you have any queries with regard to this presentation or other matters, you can contact us via email at info@wellingtonorbit.co.uk, alternatively telephone us on 01952 743377. Thank you for reading or listening to this presentation. We hope everyone has a happy end to 2020, and in the meantime, please stay safe.